Life has a strange way of testing us. One moment you are living your dreams, and the next moment everything feels broken. I never thought I would lose my husband so soon. He was not just my partner. He was my best friend, my safe place, and my world. The day he left this world, I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. People often say time heals wounds. But when you are suddenly alone, nights feel endless, and mornings bring no joy. I used to wake up reaching for him, only to find an empty pillow beside me. The silence in the house was louder than any sound I had ever heard. Everyone around me moved on with their lives, but I felt stuck in a dark place. The only person who seemed to share my pain was my mother-in-law. She had lost her son, the boy she had raised with love, the man I had loved with all my heart. Our grief connected us, yet at the same time, it built a wall between us. She was hurting in her own way, and I was drowning in mine. I never expected to live with her, but fate pushed me into her home. At first, I thought it would only be for a few weeks. I was wrong. That one decision changed everything. I thought I had lost everything when my husband died. But living with my mother-in-law taught me that sometimes life takes one blessing away only to replace it with another. Something unexpected, something powerful, something life-changing. This is a story of how grief broke me. But love, in the most surprising form, helped me stand again. It was a bright morning, the kind of morning that normally makes you feel alive. The sun was warm, the sky was clear, and the world outside looked peaceful. But inside my heart, a storm was waiting, a storm I never imagined would come that day. My husband had left early for work. He kissed my forehead, smiled, and said, "I'll be back soon." Those were the last words I heard from him. Hours later, a phone call shattered my life forever. I still remember the trembling in my hands as I picked up the phone. A stranger's voice, heavy and cold, told me there had been an accident. At first, I thought it must be some mistake. My husband was strong, healthy, and full of life. How could he be gone? But when I reached the hospital and saw the lifeless body on the bed, my soul broke into pieces. The funeral felt like a dream or maybe a nightmare. People surrounded me with tears and whispers, but I couldn't hear anything clearly. My eyes stayed fixed on the coffin, and my heart screamed silently. Every step toward the grave felt heavier than the earth itself. I wanted to run, to wake up, to escape, but there was no escape. Standing beside me was my mother-in-law. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. She held my hand tightly, and for a moment, I forgot she was my mother-in-law. She was just another broken soul, just like me, saying goodbye to the most precious person in her life. After the burial, people went back to their homes. They comforted us with words, then returned to their own families. But we stayed behind with silence, with emptiness, with the pain that would not leave. That night, I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling. I kept waiting for my husband's call, kept expecting to hear the sound of his keys at the door. But all I heard was the ticking of the clock and the quiet sobs of my mother-in-law from the other room. In that moment, I realized something had changed forever. My life had split into two parts. Before that day and after that day, nothing would ever be the same again. After the funeral, my own house became unbearable. Every corner whispered his name. His shirts still hung in the closet. His books were still on the shelf, waiting for him to return. The chair he used to sit on stood empty, like a ghost in the room. I tried to stay there, but each day felt heavier than the last. One evening, my mother-in-law came to visit. She looked at me with tired eyes, the same eyes that cried with me at the grave. She didn't speak much, but her silence carried a message. Finally, she said softly, "You shouldn't be alone like this. Come stay with me, at least for some time." At first, I hesitated. Living with her felt strange. I was her daughter-in-law, not her daughter. Would she really want me there, or was she just being kind? But deep inside, I knew she was right. Being alone was killing me slowly. So I packed a small bag and followed her to her home. Her house was different from mine. Older, quieter, filled with memories of her son's childhood. His photos were everywhere, on the walls and frames on the shelves. Each picture showed him smiling, alive, full of life. For a moment, it felt like he was still around us. The first few days were awkward. We didn't know how to talk to each other. She would sit in one corner, knitting or praying, while I stayed in another, staring at the floor. We ate together in silence, both of us lost in our thoughts. Sometimes, she looked at me as if she wanted to say something, but the words never came out. At night, I heard her crying softly in her room. I cried too, but in silence. We were two women under the same roof, carrying the same wound, but too afraid to open it in front of each other. Still, something inside me felt a little safer there. I wasn't alone anymore. Even if we didn't speak much, her presence gave me a strange kind of comfort. She was my husband's mother, the one who had loved him long before I ever knew him. Being near her was like being near a part of him. I told myself it was only temporary, that soon I would return to my own home. But life had different plans. What began as a short stay slowly turned into weeks, then months. And without realizing it, I was starting a new chapter in my life, one that I never expected to write. Living under the same roof with my mother-in-law was not as easy as I thought. At first, I believed her presence would heal me quickly, but soon I realized that grief has many shapes, and sometimes those shapes clash. Every morning, she woke up before sunrise. She lit a small lamp, prayed quietly, and started her chores. I, on the other hand, had lost all energy. I wanted to stay in bed, to hide from the world, to escape the pain. When she saw me still lying there, she would gently remind me, "Life must go on, child." I nodded, but inside I felt guilty and angry. How could life go on when my husband was gone? Meals became another silent struggle. She cooked simple food, the way she liked it. I often missed the dishes my husband and I used to enjoy together. Sometimes she placed the food in front of me without a word. Sometimes she asked if I wanted to help, but I rarely did. My body was there, but my heart was not. There were moments when we misunderstood each other. Once, I left my husband's photo frame on the table. She quietly moved it back to the shelf where she kept his other things. I felt hurt, as if she was taking him away from me. Another time, I tried to wash his old jacket, and she stopped me. Her voice trembled as she said, "Don't touch it. Let it stay as it is." I didn't argue, but I cried in my room that night. We were both grieving, but in different ways. She wanted to protect his memories exactly as they were. I wanted to hold on by keeping him close in daily life. Neither of us was wrong, yet we could not express our pain to each other. The house often felt heavy with silence. At night, I lay awake listening to the ticking clock, while faint sobs came from her room. I wondered if she also listened to mine. We were two broken hearts on the same roof, each hiding from the other. But in that silence, I began to notice small things. She would leave an extra blanket folded neatly on my bed when nights were cold. When she made tea, she always poured a second cup for me, even if I didn't ask. When my eyes were red from crying, she never questioned me, but she placed a glass of water near me. These little gestures told me something words could not. She cared. She just didn't know how to show it loudly. Maybe I was the same. Living together was not perfect. Some days we felt like strangers. Other days, like two shadows walking side by side. But slowly, I began to see that behind her strictness, there was love. And behind my silence, there was respect. Our struggles continued, but something inside me whispered that these quiet battles were only the beginning of a new bond, one we had not yet discovered. Time moved slowly in my mother-in-law's house. Days passed in silence, and nights were filled with unspoken grief. Yet, little by little, something began to change. It started with small, almost invisible acts of kindness. One morning, I woke up late. I expected to find the kitchen empty, but instead, I saw a plate of warm breakfast waiting on the table. She had cooked my favorite dish, the one her son used to love. She didn't say anything, and I didn't either, but my eyes grew wet. It was as if she had cooked for him, and through that for me too. Another time, I was struggling with a heavy bucket of water. Before I could even ask, she took it from my hands. "You hurt yourself," she said, her voice firm but gentle. I stood there surprised, realizing that she cared about me more than she admitted. One evening, the power went out. I sat in the dark, feeling my fear grow. Suddenly, she walked into my room holding a lantern. She placed it beside me and sat quietly until the lights returned. She didn't try to talk. She just stayed there, making sure I wasn't alone. That night, for the first time since my husband's death, I felt a sense of peace. Slowly, I began noticing her in new ways. The way she folded my clothes neatly, the way she checked if I had eaten, the way she covered me with a blanket when I fell asleep on the couch. These were not grand gestures, but they spoke louder than any words. One night, I found her sitting in the living room, holding a photo of her son. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered his name. Without thinking, I sat beside her. For a long time, we said nothing. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, "He loved you more than his own life." I couldn't hold back my tears. In that moment, the wall between us cracked. We held each other, two women bound by the same love, the same loss. For the first time, we cried together instead of crying alone. From that day, things began to feel different. The silence in the house was still there, but it was no longer heavy. It was softer, filled with unspoken understanding. Her small act of kindness showed me that she was not just my husband's mother. She was also someone who cared for me deeply, even if she didn't always say out loud. And in her quiet way, she was teaching me how to live again. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Life at my mother-in-law's house had begun to feel like home, but a sense of curiosity lingered in my heart. There were corners of her home I had never seen, drawers I had never opened, and cupboards that seemed full of memories too sacred to touch. One quiet evening, I was walking past her room when I heard a soft, rustling sound. At first, I thought it was the wind, but then I realized it was her, sitting on the floor, talking quietly to herself. I paused, listening. She was humming a song my husband used to sing when he was a little boy. Her voice trembled, and I felt an ache in my chest. I didn't mean to, but my eyes wandered to the small wooden box she had been holding. It was old and slightly worn, tied with a faded ribbon. Curiosity mixed with hesitation. I didn't want to intrude, but something inside me whispered that this box held a piece of him, my husband. The next day, I found the box tucked away in the corner of her cupboard. My heart raced as I opened it slowly. Inside were letters, photographs, and small mementos from his life. There were childhood pictures of him playing in the garden, letters he had written to his mother when he was away at college, and even a small note addressed to me. I held the note in my hands. Trembling, it read, "To my love, if anything ever happens to me, know that my mother will always care for you. Trust her as I do." My eyes filled with tears. I realized that even in death, he had been thinking of me and our bond with his mother. But there was more. The letters revealed sides of my husband I had never known. His dreams, his fears, the little things he had wanted to tell me, but never did. One letter mentioned how proud he was of the way I handled life's challenges, how he believed I could overcome anything. Another letter expressed his wish that I and his mother would become close, that we would support each other when he was gone. Sitting there, I felt a wave of emotions, love, grief, and gratitude all at once. I looked at my mother-in-law and finally understood why she had been so protective of these memories. She had been guarding not just her son's past, but also the bond he wanted us to share. That night, I returned the box to its place, but I didn't close my heart to it. Instead, I felt a strange warmth, a connection not just to my husband but to his mother as well. I realized that grief didn't have to separate us. It could bring us closer if we were willing to open our hearts. From that day on, I began noticing small changes in our relationship. We started talking more, sharing stories, laughing softly at memories of him. The secret box had become a bridge, connecting the past to the present, allowing both of us to heal together. And in that quiet moment, I understood something powerful. Even in loss, life can gift us unexpected blessings. My mother-in-law, the woman I had once seen as distant and strict, was now a part of my support, my strength, and my family. And it all began with a little wooden box, full of memories and love, waiting for us to discover. After discovering the secret box, something began to shift between my mother-in-law and me. It was as if the invisible wall of grief between us had finally started to crumble. The next evening, she called me to sit beside her in the living room. In her hands, she held a cup of tea, her fingers trembling slightly, as if she were nervous about what she was about to say. "I want to tell you about him," she whispered. "Not just the boy you knew, but the little boy I raised." I nodded, leaning closer. Her voice was soft, but filled with emotion, and I realized that for the first time, she wanted me to share her memories, not just mourn with her. She spoke of his childhood adventures, the times he got into trouble at school, the small victories no one else noticed, and the dreams he once held in his heart. Each story painted a picture of a boy full of energy, curiosity, and love, a boy I had loved growing into the man I married. As she spoke, I began to share my own memories of him. The little things that made me smile, the habits only I noticed, the dreams we had whispered each other at night. For the first time since his passing, I felt like I was not alone in my grief. We were grieving together, but also remembering together, and it made the pain feel lighter somehow. Some nights, we would sit for hours, going through photographs, laughing at the silly moments, crying at the quiet ones. She told me stories I had never heard before, like the way he used to leave little notes for her in his room, or how he always made sure to hide a treat for her when he went shopping. Every story revealed a side of him that I had missed, and each one drew us closer. Through these stories, I began to see her not just as my mother-in-law, but as a woman who had loved her son fiercely, and who now wanted to love me in return. I realized she had been trying to connect with me all along, even in her quiet, sometimes strict ways, and I had been too wrapped in my own sorrow to notice. One evening, she looked at me and said softly, "I want you to live, even though he is gone. I want you to smile again for him and for yourself." Her words touched my heart deeply. I realized that healing wasn't about forgetting him. It was about cherishing his memory and letting it guide me, not chain me. By sharing stories, we were keeping him alive in our hearts, while also learning to live again. From that day on, our home felt lighter. The laughter returned in small doses. The quiet moments were no longer heavy, and our bond grew stronger with each shared memory. Healing, I realized, didn't happen overnight. It was a journey, one story at a time, one memory at a time, shared with someone who understood your pain and loved you anyway. Through stories, I learned to love him all over again, and through her, I learned to love life again. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The quiet house that once felt heavy and lonely now felt warm. My mother-in-law and I had begun to share more than grief. We were sharing life, memories, and even laughter. It started with small gestures. She would ask me how my day went, not just out of politeness, but genuinely. I found myself looking forward to our conversations, no matter how short. I began helping her with chores, not because I had to, but because it felt natural. Slowly, our routines intertwined, creating a rhythm that made the house feel alive again. One afternoon, while we were cooking together, she smiled at me and said, "You know, you remind me so much of him, not just of how you love, but in your spirit." My heart skipped a beat. Her words were more than a compliment. They were acceptance, love, and trust all rolled into one. For the first time, I felt like I belonged, not just in her home, but in her heart. We started sharing memories, not just about my husband, but about ourselves. She told me about her younger days, her struggles and dreams. I shared my own hopes and fears. It felt like we were discovering each other for the first time, like two strangers slowly becoming family. There were still difficult days, of course. Grief never fully disappears, and sometimes the pain would return unexpectedly. But those days became easier because we faced them together. A gentle touch, a shared smile, a quiet conversation. These became our way of healing. One evening, I found her sitting on the porch, gazing at the stars. I joined her, and we sat in comfortable silence, both lost in our thoughts. Then she took my hand in hers and said, "I never imagined I would have you in my life this way. You've brought light into this house and into my heart." Tears welled up in my eyes. I realized that I had lost my husband, but I had gained something I never expected: a mother, a friend, and a companion who loved me not because I was her daughter-in-law, but because she chose to. Our bond had grown stronger than I could have imagined. It was built on shared grief, yes, but also on mutual respect, understanding, and love. The walls we had once built around ourselves had come down, replaced by trust and warmth. In that new bond, I found hope. I found a sense of family I had feared I would never have again. And I understood that life, even after loss, has a way of giving us unexpected gifts. Gifts that can heal wounds, fill hearts, and change us forever. It was late at night, and the house was quiet except for the soft ticking of the clock. I couldn't sleep, as I often did these days. Something told me to check on my mother-in-law. I tiptoed toward her room and froze when I heard her whispering softly to herself. I asked for strength to guide her, to protect her, as if she were my own daughter, she murmured, her voice trembling. I felt my chest tighten. I hadn't expected to hear this. All these months, I had thought her as strict, distant, and sometimes unapproachable. But in that moment, I realized that behind her quiet exterior was a heart filled with love. Love not only for her son, but for me, the woman he had cherished. I stood silently, unsure if I should speak or leave. But her words continued, and each one pierced my heart like a warm ray of light breaking through a storm. She was praying for me, thinking of me, wishing me strength and happiness. She was carrying a love I had never imagined. Tears welled up in my eyes as I slowly entered the room. She looked up, startled at first, then her expression softened when she saw me. Without a word, I sat beside her. We held hands, and in the quiet of that night, our hearts spoke a language words could not capture. For the first time, I felt the full weight of her love. Not the love she had for her son alone, but the love she had for me, a love that had grown quietly, patiently, over months of shared grief, memories, and small acts of kindness. I realized that I had not only gained her guidance and support, but also a second chance at family, at belonging, at being loved. We stayed like that for hours, talking softly about memories, sharing silent tears, and laughing softly at small moments we had shared over the past months. That night, something shifted between us. The bond we had been building finally solidified into something unbreakable. We were no longer two broken hearts trying to survive together. We were a family, connected by love that transcended loss. As I left her room later, I felt a strange sense of peace. I knew that life would never be the same, but it could be beautiful again. I had lost my husband, yes, but in his absence, I had gained something even more precious, a mother who loved me as her own, a companion who would stand by me, and a bond that could never be broken. That night, I finally understood the true meaning of family. It isn't just about blood. It's about love, trust, and the willingness to open your heart, even after loss. And in that quiet night, I realized that sometimes life gives us blessings we never expect, in forms more powerful than we could ever imagine. The days after that night felt different. The house no longer felt heavy with grief. Instead, it felt alive, filled with warmth, laughter, and the quiet comfort of shared understanding. My mother-in-law and I had moved past the walls of sorrow that had kept us apart. We were no longer just two women bound by loss. We were companions, friends, and family in a way I had never expected. Our mornings became brighter. We would make breakfast together, chatting about small things, the weather, memories of her son, or plans for the day. Sometimes, we even teased each other, a gentle reminder that life, even after pain, could hold joy again. These small routines became the threads, weaving our bond stronger with each passing day. I began finding purpose again. I started taking small steps to rebuild my life, finding work, reconnecting with friends, and slowly reclaiming the life my husband had hoped I would live. Through it all, my mother-in-law stood beside me, offering guidance without ever imposing. She became my mentor, my cheerleader, and my anchor. Her support reminded me that I didn't have to carry the weight of life alone. We also began honoring my husband in new ways. We created a small corner in the house with his photos, letters, and the secret box. Every week, we would sit together, remembering him, laughing at his quirks, and celebrating the love we shared. It was a way to keep him alive in our hearts without letting grief consume us. The bond between us grew stronger than I could have imagined. We no longer needed words for every feeling. A glance or a touch was enough. She became a mother to me in ways I had never expected, and I became a daughter to her not by blood, but by choice and love. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, she smiled and said, "I never thought I could feel this happy again. You brought life back into this house." My heart swelled with emotion. I realized that I had gained more than family. I had gained hope, love, and a sense of belonging I thought was lost forever. I understood then that life is unpredictable. It takes away what we cherish most, but also gives us unexpected gifts in return. My husband's absence had left a void, but in that void, a new bond had blossomed, stronger, deeper, and filled with unconditional love. As I held her hand that evening, I felt gratitude overwhelm me. I had lost my husband, yes, but I had gained something equally precious, a second chance of family, a mother who loved me and the courage to live again. Together, we had learned that even after loss, life could be beautiful, meaningful, and full of love. And in moving forward together, we discovered that the heart has an endless capacity to heal, forgive, and love again. Looking back, I realized that life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. Losing my husband was the most painful moment of my life. It felt like the ground beneath me had disappeared, leaving only emptiness and sorrow. I thought I had lost everything, my partner, my dreams, and even my sense of belonging. But in that deep darkness, life gave me a gift I never imagined. My mother-in-law, the woman I had once seen as distant and strict, became my companion, my friend, and my second mother. Through grief, patience, and small acts of love, we discovered a bond that was stronger than loss, deeper than sorrow, and more enduring than time. The journey was not easy. There were days of silence, misunderstanding, and pain. But there were also moments of laughter, shared memories, and quiet comfort. We learned that healing doesn't come from avoiding pain, but from facing together, from holding each other up when the world feels heavy, and from letting love grow in the most unexpected ways. I lost my husband, but in the process, I gained something equally precious. I gained family, not just by blood, but by choice and love. I gained hope, strength, and the courage to move forward. And most importantly, I gained the understanding that love doesn't end with loss. It transforms, it grows, and it finds new ways to shine. If there's one thing I want to share, it is this. Life may take away what we cherish most, but it also has a way of giving back, sometimes in forms we never imagined. Blessings can come disguised as challenges. Grief can bring people together. And even in our darkest moments, love can guide us toward light. So, if you are grieving, lost, or feeling alone, remember that life is full of surprises. Open your heart to the unexpected. Cherish the love that surrounds you, and trust that even after the deepest sorrow, there is hope, healing, and a chance to love again. Because sometimes, losing everything is just the beginning of gaining something far more beautiful.